You're listening to Free Indeed Radio, the podcast from Free Indeed Ministries.
Today on Free Indeed Radio,
Like real love, it doesn't seek its own. You know, like 1 Corinthians 13 talks about it doesn't seek its own validation from somebody else.
and now here are your hosts, Brandon and John.
Hello, welcome back to Free Indeed Radio. I'm Brandon.
And I'm John.
So today we're going to talk about sex, love, and intimacy, and how just how it gets all kinds of screwed up in our minds and in culture, in Christian culture, almost kind of especially.
Right.
Like I know just that growing up in our afraid to talk about sex culture that I grew up in, and with the porn, and especially with the confusing things about sex in the world, like it's just something that you do, and then, you know, learning about love and intimacy and what they were and what they weren't, just on my own, it just got so screwed up so quick, and it's a major part of our teaching in Free Indeed.
For sure.
So, yeah, we thought it'd be good to just talk about that.
Well, let's see how they are together, you know, a three-stranded cord, and yet how they do function very much independently from each other on their own.
Mm-hmm.
So in the mind of someone who's very sexually active, especially outside of what God has called it to be, anything outside of marriage between one man and one woman, for biblical terms, then we find that sex, love, and intimacy almost become one thing. There's like three different colors of clay, but they've all been mashed together into one big ball. And so again, we want to kind of pull those colors apart and show you them. We often come from, with this topic, from the same-sex attracted mind, because that's where we find the most confusion.
Well, yeah, so we talk about it from the perspective of when you're talking about sexual orientation, especially with somebody who deals with same-sex attraction or gender identity issues. If you've heard us speak at all before, we'll say, we talk about this specifically when we're talking about that phrase, hate the sin, love the sinner.
Right.
And like if that person's sin is their sex, and they are identifying as their sex, and that's where their love is, and that's where their intimacy is tied in, because in their mind it's all one jumbled ball, then you just said, you know, I hate your sin, but I love you, or whatever, or God hates your sin but loves you. Then you say to that person, essentially, God hates you through and through because you are your sin in your mind. And how, you know, when you tell somebody who thinks that way, well, you just need to be celibate for the rest of your life. What you essentially just told that person is, you're never going to experience love or intimacy in the fullness that it possibly could be with another human being, because you can't have sex with them.
Right.
Because love, sex, and intimacy are all the same thing.
Right.
And you can have sex with somebody without loving them or being intimate with them. You can love somebody without having sex with them or being intimate with them. And you can be intimate with somebody without loving them or having sex with them. You know, like that's very much a thing. And
when you say without loving him, you're talking about in the the sexual kind of way, because there's different kinds of love, of course, and we're not going to go necessarily into all of that as a heavy breakdown, because we want to keep these categories just clear, because that's the topic. So the sex of things, obviously, that we believe, and we know that God believes, that sex itself is an act between a man and a woman, and inside of marriage. Outside of marriage, people are just as responsible before the Lord as anybody. It doesn't matter what two people it is. So we know that that's there, and there are different things that drive us to sex, fears, anxieties, lies we've believed about ourselves.
Or even just
identity.
Regular plain old desire.
And then, of course, just desire. Like, that's what I wanted, so that's what I did. And in society today, of course, it's taught that because you're nothing more than an animal, you have to go out and do things that your body wants you to do, that your sensations want you to do, and that there's no self-control. It's just stuff, that happens. And we know that that's not true, because you can certainly, you should have self-control. You're called to self-control, and God will give you, through Holy Spirit, self-control. So you don't have to just respond because that's what you felt like when you saw somebody. So that's kind of the sex thing. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I'm careful with that word, self-control. Because my ideas of what that means in Scripture has actually changed recently. With Pastor Curtis's, one of his sermons, an expose on the fruit of the Spirit, and how self-control, when you look at the Greek words, they mean, they literally and contextually translate to a powerful sense of self, like a powerful sense of security and identity.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And with that, you are being controlled by the Spirit.
Exactly.
Like, self-control is not, I exercise self-control.
Correct.
It's, I relinquish my control of this action to the Holy Spirit, and then He, by His grace and power, controls or gives power to my action.
Exactly. And I'm glad you said that, because we agree on that. Self-control, once again, is not putting it on you to become your own master, because then that would be going the wrong way, and you are in control of everything, whether you're white-knuckling it or you're just going to be the guy that makes all the decisions for you, because then obviously that's going the wrong direction. Mm-hmm. But it's good that thank you for bringing that up, because I think it's not taught that way enough. I know I didn't learn that until just a few years ago, that self-control was actually something that God does, and I'm giving myself to Him to have that esteem and control, whatever, and that identity in Him, so that I choose the right actions, and I want to, and it's because of grace that I can, and grace doesn't cause it to be spilled out and do my own thing.
Right.
So good stuff. So that's kind of the sex piece then.
Mm-hmm.
So like you had said, one can be done without the other. So let's talk about intimacy, because I think that's a big deal when you're talking to especially single people. Mm-hmm. The idea that they won't be able to be intimate with another person and go through life with somebody as a life partner or whatever that means. Yeah.
Well, I mean, especially, like, I know a lot of people who they feel very lovesick. Just like longing that companionship and longing for that intimacy. And that's not a bad thing, but intimacy looks like a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. You and I are very intimate.
Right.
We do a lot of life together. We do a lot of our daily things,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and go through a lot of hard things.
Right.
In that kind of commitment, like, I'm not walking away from you, you're not walking away from me, and I'm secure in that, and that fosters, you know, just being able to talk about things. You can have that. You can have that kind of intimacy, really, with anybody who's committed to you
Mm-hmm.
in life, you know.
Sure.
And it doesn't always necessarily look like with a woman or with a man if you're a lady. You know, it looks like intimate, revealing friendship where the Holy Spirit is allowed to be in there. And obviously, love is a piece that's necessary
Sure.
for intimacy. But I guess in this context of like being open, transparent, and intimate with somebody just in a conversation, like, you don't have to have an intimate, committed knowledge of that person in order to be intimate with them in a moment.
Right.
You know. And we need that level of relationship with people in our lives, you know.
Yeah, or it could be, well, it would be lonely.
Yeah.
And the key to all of what we're saying, everybody, is that each of these points that we're bringing up, they are not the whole thing. There's a lot more to it, but we want to just get you thinking about these things and get you talking about it and start seeing maybe even your life differently, and how have you mixed them together or put too much emphasis or said that one naturally leads to the other, like an intimacy leads to sex. Well, that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that we put that is each of these before the Lord will then be righteous in itself, and it will be a good relationship, and it'll be deep and meaningful, and it'll have purpose in your life, such as our relationship. You know, Brandon and I do not have sex. I mean, well, hello, no. But we are incredibly intimate. We know details about each other that no one would ever know or need to know.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what God's put there, and we keep that before the Lord in prayer, in respect, and that's where that type of godly love comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Because too often now, as we move over from intimacy to love, people put love as sex, and that's what our culture sells it as.
Mm-hmm.
Love is sex, and it's nothing, you know, it's very little more. And it's so easy for us to be drawn into that path that leads down it. And we see it even in kids' shows, you know, little kids suddenly have to be kissing and so forth and touching each other in order to care about each other, even in a movie or a cartoon. It's amazing.
Yeah. And I guess I had seen, in my life specifically, sex, love, and intimacy were so tightly bound together that I couldn't imagine one without the other.
Yeah.
And like that's just
the hard part, right?
Yeah.
Seeing it for what it is, that's great. Tell us more about that.
Well, I mean, as I've been going through this new season of my life, God has definitely even still been peeling apart those things, tying in like where my mind had been struggling with feeling not good enough in all these different places, and how without sex, or at least the prospect of sex, or you know, love, the idea of love was tied up in just this a feeling and a response, and
like a physical response, or just
like an emotional response.
Okay. Sure.
Christ has definitely been growing my ideas of what love and intimacy and sex actually are, and just how separate they are, and how versatile the idea and the concept of love really is.
Wow.
He's definitely been taking me deeper into what love means, especially just between people. I've been learning, and this is just personally, like, I've been learning that love doesn't require a response from you. Like real love, it doesn't seek its own.
Right.
Like 1 Corinthians 13 talks about, it doesn't seek its own validation from somebody else.
That's good.
In sex, or in you finding value in their response or something like that, it's very encompassing. And I've been very blessed to be with a woman and with other people around me who are showing me that my value in my understanding of their love towards me was always based on how well I could respond to them. Love was always one-sided, and so my love had to be one-sided. And if it couldn't match or mirror or transcend how I thought in my head they were responding to me, then my love wasn't good enough, because it was all wrapped up in how I felt or how I thought I was supposed to feel or respond,
Right.
And like that's a big part of worldly love, and how, I think that we're trained to understand love as, it's something that you have to work really hard at and you have to try really hard to do. But really it's just at its baseline, it's acceptance. It's a real acceptance. It's a disposition. It's not something that you have to conjure.
Right.
And it's not a feeling response to something, because I always thought, like, if my feeling response wasn't there, then I didn't love whoever I was supposed to be loving in my mind,
And how could you ever keep that standard, or anybody?
Right.
Because everybody's going to respond to you differently. And then all of a sudden this quote, love, is really just that I felt nice about you at this moment or whatever. Because as soon as something falls apart and goes wrong, there's nothing
where's
left.
Love? Yeah. But love is definitely much, much deeper and much more robust than that.
Absolutely.
And so, like, as it relates to what we're talking about, that was something that's how my idea of love was tied up with sex and intimacy. Like, I can't have love without sex, because it's part of the response. That's how
the response package, if you will. Gotcha.
And so that's just how it looked for me. It can look an infinite number of different ways for other people.
Sure.
But it's just, it's hard. It's a difficult thing to navigate through.
It is. And that's why we're just talking about it, so that you can look at your own life and go, where am I mixing these things? Where have I implied them to an area in my life that it doesn't belong?
Mm-hmm.
Like what we've been saying, that if this person really wants to be close to me, then why aren't we doing more about it? And that's where God is and needs to be. Because especially if you're both, if you're opposite sex attracted or same sex, it's like, well, what are we going to do with this now? Well, we're going to keep it before the Lord so that we do it right. Is it, two guys might get together or two women and be roommates forever, even opposite sex attracted, but yet they're close, and because they don't take it to the point of harm. And that's all we're talking about is look at these things in your life and how you're responding in your relationships, or maybe you're even holding yourself back from becoming, let's say, intimate with somebody because you're afraid that it might lead to something that you don't want. And certainly it doesn't have to, and it won't. There's nothing to fear when you have God involved with the relationship. Mm-hmm. When He's there and present, it's okay. So basically, straight guys, don't worry about if you get to know a gay guy. He's not going to sleep with you because that's not what's going to happen. You're not going to just end up having to do that to have a friendship. That's just the enemy trying to convince you that this person has no value to you. And God's saying, this person is valuable to me, and I've sent you. Now go and do what I've called you and asked you to do.
Well, and even, straight Christian guys who, I know guys who are very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very, very reserved. They'll call themselves very patient. They'll take years and years and years to get to know a girl, and it's like, oh, I just don't know. I don't know if it's what the Lord wants, and
right.
And it's out of fear of just like what you said, like, well, maybe I won't want to be with this person, or like having all of those ducks in a row before you decide to take that extra step, just to see if that is where you would want to go. Now obviously you're not going to do that with everybody,
right?
But I know that being too quick to the trigger and being like poop or get off the pot type of
right.
thing,
this has got to be it because it felt good last night, or in my heart today. Hurry.
They're both short-sighted.
Yeah.
And like, you don't have to be afraid of those things happening. I know that in my mind, I was always afraid that the next person I liked would just be a stepping stone to someone else. Like
well, and that balls up the love, sex, intimacy thing, because it was all or nothing until the next all or nothing.
Yeah, it's like have to have the whole mental preconceived notion package of what relationship looks like, of what love looks like, and intimacy, and all my feelings have to be there all the time, and all the stars have to align for this to be okay, because if it doesn't, I am completely screwed. I'm left out in the cold, and I'm just going to be in pain, and there's going to be nothing to show for it.
And God's a failure.
And like, whether or not single Christian guys will admit it, that's exactly what they think. Because you're there. Tell us about it, And, I'm in a wonderful relationship with a girl. And, it's been the most amazing thing of my life. But the part of why I know it's good and why God is doing this is because it's also been the scariest and most difficult thing, because my entire ideas of what love and relationship have or were supposed to look like have just been turned upside down. Christ has been satisfying my deepest insecurities, and I have been able to give grace and help satisfy and build up her deepest insecurities.
Right.
And it's just really cool and uplifting. And
I think that's a great picture of, especially if somebody's not in a relationship or they just got out of one or whatever, before you go into that next one, be prepared to let God in there, like you're talking about, and let him possibly even turn your world upside down. Because, in worldly psychology, the trend is, and the talking points are, well, she always marries these bad guys, and he always picks the wrong woman, always failing relationships. Well, the reason for that is because God's not in it. And even though Christians will do exactly the same thing, they're no different. If you take a little more critical look at it and go, okay, but have I allowed God to change the way I think? If I always end up in a disaster because I always follow the same path, then isn't it time to let God get in there and say, this is the path you need to follow so you don't end up where you always think you will? Because I have more for you. I have better for you. And you can have all of these things, and I don't want you to fail in it. I want to teach you. I want to hold you up. I want to build you. And too often we're so quick to go to trying to create a relationship and an intimacy, whether it's going to be long-term or not, and then we just close God out of it. And you have not done that. You have opened up to God and said, wow, this is really tough, but go ahead. Change my way of thinking. Show me what was and what is and what's to come. I think it's great.
Mm-hmm. And, it's really, I'm trying to think of how to put it. We think of that process as being manageable. Like, okay, yeah, it's really scary, it's really hard, but at least I can manage it. And the truth about it is that something as deep as your understanding of sex, love, intimacy, and relationships, if there's different and difficult stuff in there that's been ingrained in you, it's not pleasant to have that upturned.
No.
I mean, but it's
the same for all of us.
It's
I know
good.
For me too. It is good.
It's good, and it's how Christ brings us into health.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who has known me for more than, a few years, has seen or at least heard about my track record with relationships, just disaster after disaster.
Mm-hmm.
And Christ said, here is this person. You are not allowed to run. You are not allowed to step away from this because I want to take you into health. I want to change your mind. And because she needs you as much as you need her.
Right.
And I think that, and I didn't know that beforehand. I didn't hear that from God beforehand. I just, had this really fun story with this girl that I liked, and I wasn't afraid of it progressing as it was.
Mm-hmm.
So, Christian guys, don't be afraid of the natural progression of things, even if it's scary. You don't have to be so deathly afraid of intimacy because what if it goes away, or what if I'm not good enough, or
Yeah, because again, intimacy doesn't mean sex, and it doesn't mean relationship to the point of like marrying or whatever, because like we've been saying, what if it's with a man, and you're able to have like what we have, the depth of friendship and intimacy. Because I think as you're saying this, you're right, you didn't know it in the beginning, so we start on the path that we've always known. And then are we ready to let God take over, which is what you did, because you didn't get very far down the path and you started going, wait a minute, I don't want it to be this old way. I see these old things happening, and God came in and began to do a work and do a change of you. You can't change you because you only know what you can do and what you want to do. So you head for it, but God can. And that goes with all of our points here: sex, love, and intimacy. God can reorder them because he orders your steps, and he will lay them out so that you can follow them it's peaceful, even if it's painful. And we're not saying, and I know you're not saying, well, it's going to all be tough and painful. No, God doesn't make it painful for us. We do, because of our choices and because of our habits. God's bringing us into a righteous way of thinking, and our flesh goes kicking and screaming out of that. We don't want to let go.
Yeah. No, I definitely don't want to be that guy who's like, oh, it's just terrible, because it's not. It's been truly wonderful.
Yeah. But the process can be tough. It takes some doing, right? And going through. But God has been there to support you and give you more and more.
Well, and the thing is so is she.
Right, in the case of...
And I've been there with her through really hard things too. Yeah. And Christ especially equipped us. And just seriously, like every day, he shows me just how different we really are from our old patterns, and just everything, her family. I never thought that my significant other's family could like me. I thought that was like a faraway dream.
Yeah.
There are just specific things that Christ has been showing me. And I guess this is my point, is that being terrified about whether or not it's right isn't right.
There you go.
Thinking things through with wisdom is one thing.
Right.
But like I'm of the persuasion that when two people have grace for each other in their differences, shortcomings, failings, things that are similar, when there is grace, when there is Christ, it's okay. That openness, that transparency, that ability to just be able to talk, and talk through, not just talk about, but talk through your fears and insecurities. Like Christ brought me somebody who I could talk through my insecurities and fears with, because she was different enough from me and is strong.
That's right.
In the ways that I'm weak. And I'm strong in ways that she's weak.
Right.
And we hold each other up in Christ, and we remind each other of who we really are. Like that's...
And which piece of... Well, that's
love.
The idea. That's love, and it's intimacy. Right? Because you had a Christ love to start it, and now you've become intimate in love and understanding and identity, is what you're saying. Without the sex, because it's not necessary to have that to make these two work. Right. And God's showing you that and teaching you that. And he does so much for me too, Brandon. I am I'm terminally single, and I'm okay with that. But as I relate to people, especially men that I know and respect, I'm learning. I've learned new patterns and new ways. I've learned how to be in the room and not feel lesser because I can't achieve something that I think that I always needed in order to be considered worthy to be around people,
Mm-hmm.
or having to to make sure that person, that guy likes me, I need to have sex with him so that way I feel like I'm somewhat of an equal.
Mm-hmm.
And God has just come in, and because I've allowed him to have my self, and he is in control, he has led me and brought me and changed my mind about how to be that guy in the room and how to have those friends.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a big deal. It's a big deal. And you're right, it wasn't easy. And it took a whole lot of doing the same old thing and just changing one little thing that I didn't even realize I was changing. And then all of a sudden I'm somewhere else. It's like, I desire that.
Well, and like the real part is that we can't change ourselves.
Right, that's what we've been saying.
We can't make a single hair on our head black or gray. And that's been a big theme in my life lately is
Right.
I cannot, and I'm not responsible for changing my old ways of thinking.
Right.
It's, okay, Jesus, this is how I think. This is what's going on right now. I need you to take control. I need you to do your thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I can't change this, and I'm afraid, or
Right.
I'm angry, like whatever it is for you in your life and heart. Like, stop trying to change yourself. Stop trying to take control of splitting those things apart, the sex, love, and intimacy. Stop trying to be God for yourself, and let God be God enough to be in control of that process.
Right. Don't unscramble the egg, because you can't.
Mm-hmm.
But God will. Or he'll fry it up, make it nice and firm so that you can stand on it. And it'll be your past. And God's got you covered.
And I'm hungry now.
And now I'm hungry. So let him make an omelet out of it. But thanks so much for joining us, and thanks for letting us share this truth with you, because there's a lot more to it. Get in touch with us. We're happy to talk to you about it. Watch our YouTubes at some of the places we've been, because we do talk about this in a little more detail as well.
Mm-hmm.
We love you.
So, yeah, thanks again for listening to Free Indeed Radio, and go out and change someone's mind about God.
Thank you for listening to Free Indeed Radio. Send us your prayer requests, comments, and suggestions to freeindeedco@gmail.com. We would love to hear how the Lord has touched your life and rejoice with you. Don't forget to sign up to follow us by email on the website and get our app from the Google Play Store. Free Indeed is listener supported, and we invite you to come check out how you can support us through our website at www.freeindeedco.com. Free Indeed Ministries believes that your tithes belong to your local church, and we receive your donations as offerings to support the mission of Free Indeed to advance the gospel of grace throughout the world. The Lord bless you as you go into your world and change someone else's mind about God.